So late night sessions are sometimes absolutely amazing, and yesterday was one of them, one of those times. It was my first real Sysmon threat hunting session. Thanks for joining me. Let's take this all apart.
The Little Root Lab is a homegrown, self-learning journey into IT and cybersecurity, narrated by Simon Arnold. It is being built from the ground up, documenting progression through systems, networking, and SOC concepts as it develops, including the mistakes, the learning process, and the real-world growth that comes with it. It is hoped that viewers find value in the series and are able to take something useful from the journey as it unfolds. Enjoy.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Little Root Lab. Let me bring that microphone in a bit closer. And wow, yesterday evening, I think I got to bed at about 1:30, something like that. I just had to load up Linux, load up Windows and see what's happening. So welcome back. Thanks for following me. And after this podcast today, I just need a couple of days off just to recharge. But it's been a brilliant week. So yesterday I basically ran my first proper Windows threat hunting workflow. And it finally started to click in a way that feels real instead of theoretical. So at the start of the session I had Windows 10 with Sysmon installed. And I already understood the basics, you know. Things like process creation logs, event ID 1, and how parent-child relationships matter. I knew the idea that explorer.exe spawning something is usually normal, and things like Office apps spawning PowerShell can be suspicious. But I hadn't really put it all together in a working workflow yet, and that's really where the late night session just came in. There was like, you know, I was in the middle of stuff, sat down on the sofa and I was like, oh wow, this is how it all links together. So the goal yesterday was to move from just looking at logs to actually interpreting behavior, which I kind of, when I sat down on the sofa, I was like, oh my God. So instead of just clicking around Event Viewer, I started focusing on Sysmon Event ID 1 data, process creation events, and Windows security logs like 4624 logon events. And I guess for those of you that are quite, you know, in the industry working, you know, these just be second nature to you all, really, these numbers. But the key idea I was trying to build was not just what ran, but how and why it ran. And that means three main fields matter in every event: the image, the parent image, and the command line. Image tells you what process executed, parent image tells you what launched it, and command line tells you how it was executed and what it was trying to do. And those things slot into place, you know, solidly last night for me. It was excellent, because those three together are basically the foundation of endpoint threat hunting. So from there I exported Sysmon logs into a file so I could actually work with them properly instead of just viewing them in an event viewer. And that's where I moved into the Linux environment Kubuntu, not as an attacker system, but as an analysis workspace. And I tell you what, you can really see the difference when you've got the $ and you're entering data, or you're entering the next command, really. That changed to, what did it change to? It adjusted itself accordingly from green to basically like a lab, what's the word? Experimental process in a way. Where, let me explain that a little bit more, really. I mean, the idea was simple. Windows generates the telemetry, right? I think we've all got that. And Linux is just a place to parse and filter it. because parsing was a big deal last night as well. So I converted the EVTX file into XML, okay, using a Python-based tool, and suddenly I had raw Sysmon Event ID 1 data in a format I could actually work with. Because it's quite interesting when you look at the event viewer on Windows 10, because you can see it when you go on to like an event ID 1 or event ID 5. You can see it in the easy to read, or you can also change it to the XML, right? So the XML is kind of just dropping into my head a little bit more understanding about that. And I guess, you know, with Linux, it kind of came together, because once I had that, I started doing the first stage of analysis using simple Linux commands like grep. I searched for key patterns like PowerShell activity, ParentImage, and CommandLine values as well. So at this stage, I wasn't really trying to find something malicious. I was just trying to understand normal behavior. What does the normal process chain look like on this system? And that's actually the important shift, everyone. Threat hunting isn't about assuming everything is bad. It's also building a baseline first. Then I narrowed in on the PowerShell event specifically, and that was the first real case study of the session. I looked at how PowerShell was launched, what its parent process was, and what command line arguments it used. That's where the behavioral analysis started to matter, and I did just say that a couple of minutes ago. It's fascinating. For example, if PowerShell is launched by explorer.exe, that usually means the user manually triggered it, right? But if it's launched by something like a Word document or Excel, that starts to look suspicious. And if the command line looks, if the command line includes things like encoded commands, hidden windows, or bypass flags, that's a major red flag in a security context. So what I ended up undertaking was building what you could call a process case card. It's basically a structured way of summarizing a single event. You take the process image, the parent process, and the command line, and you ask one question. Does this make sense in a normal user context? And from there you classify it as either normal, suspicious, or unknown. That classification isn't about being perfect, it's about learning to reason from context. I can't even speak properly, maybe I've been speaking too much German recently, I don't know. Instead of just keyword matching. Okay. So one of the biggest takeaways from today is that threat hunting is less about tools and more about interpretation. At the start of the session, I was thinking in terms of commands and logs, then I sat on the sofa, and then kind of like that was the eureka moment, because at the end I was thinking in terms of behavior and intent, and that's a real shift. But I also had to deal with some real typical Linux setup friction. Python environments, virtual environments, package installation issues, and understanding why some tools don't install globally anymore because of the modern Linux restrictions. And that was annoying at the time, but it actually forced me to understand the environment properly instead of just blindly installing things. And yeah, when you do go for Python 3 install, you know, you get the message coming up like, this is like an externally run system in a way. And we know that anyway. But once that was resolved, everything became smoother and I could focus on the actual analysis instead of fighting the system. I didn't really fight the system, I guess, anyway. It's just working through it. So overall, yesterday was about building a foundation, understanding Sysmon Event ID 1 properly, learning how to extract and filter logs, moving from Windows Event Viewer into a proper analysis workflow, and most importantly, learning how to interpret process behavior instead of just reading logs. So if I had to summarize yesterday, I stopped looking at logs as data and started looking them at behavior, and that's really the real step into threat hunting. But more so, it was an amalgamation of the homogeneous or the homogeneous way that, you know, if I see it as an entire system, rather than hyperfixating on PowerShell command, ParentImage, all this stuff, which we ultimately do at you know, when we get to grips with it, then it's kind of like, what's the word, zooming out to see much more. And with that thought, I'm going to leave you all to it. Enjoy your weekend. I'll take a few days off and I'll catch you next week.